What's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video, and we are here talking about Jake Paul in boxing. We're going to be breaking this video down to a few bits. For starters, there's just some UFC gameplay in the background. We're going to break it down into my opinion on Jake at the start, YouTubers if it's good or bad for the sport, Jake Paul as a boxer himself, and then who Jake should fight in my opinion. I'm going to try not to waffle too much, so I do apologise if I do, but hopefully we can get to these points right away, so let's just jump into it. So we're going to start with my opinion on Jake Paul. I'm going to try and take this video as a complete non-biased standpoint when it comes to that's why I'm getting my opinion on Jake Paul out in the open right away. Then I'm going to try and be completely unbiased on the rest of the video. As a whole, I dislike Jake Paul. It's not a bandwagon thing. I tried to watch YouTubers' content before I judged them, and I can't. Logan Paul, I can stand. I don't actually mind him. His content is not terrible. Jake Paul, I genuinely despise him. I think he's a toxic person. I think he's bad for any community he's a part of. And I think his fans make everything shit. It's just the way it is, you know. I'll get into what YouTubers have done to boxing in a moment, but at the minute, his fans themselves are the most disgusting set of humans I've ever come across. They're all kids, and the fact they act like that is just unbelievable. You know, Jake has done well, in my opinion, which I'll get onto him as a boxer in a moment. He's done well in the sport so far. He's capitalised on some good opportunities, but as a person, I think he's an absolute piece of shit. So now my opinion is out of the way. We know this. We're now going to get on to the next part, which is YouTubers boxing, if it's good or bad for the sport. And in my opinion, it's 50-50. You have the old people that say this is terrible for the sport. You have people that, you know, maybe old or young or whatever, and they know it's good for the sport. And then there's people that just think all boxers are shit, YouTubers can beat everyone. Now we're going to start with why it's good for the sport. For starters, it gets a lot of eyes on it. The KSI Joe Weller fight had tons of eyes. The KSI Logan Paul 1 and 2 had even more eyes on it. And same with Jake Paul, Anderson Gibb, and Jake Paul, Nate Robinson had tons of eyes on it because they were on the co-main event of the Mike Tyson fight. And let's say 1 million people watch a KSI Logan Paul fight. Even if 10,000 of those people fall in love with the sport, not just enjoy it, fall in love with it, and they watch a Canelo fight, then they watch a Triple G fight, then they watch a Terence Crawford fight, then they go and watch an Inouye fight, and then they find out Deontay Wilder, and cool, he's undefeated, and then they realise Tyson beat him, and then, you know, they go, my god, look how many titles Canelo's won, hold on, he's got a loss, who has he lost to? Floyd. Let's see who Floyd has beat, and then they find out, wow, Floyd and Ricky Hatton, both insane undefeated records. Let's watch that. I might have missed it when, you know, because I wasn't old enough. Now I get to watch it, and it's good for that sport because people will learn about it. And even if those 10,000 fall in love, another 100,000 go, all right, that's pretty good. I might watch a main event from time to time, and then they might watch a Ryan Garcia fight, a Canelo fight, Anthony Joshua fight, and that's still good for the sport. It gets more eyes on it. It gets more money in the pockets of the fighters themselves, of the promoters, which then enable them to make more events, to sign on more young talent, and in that way, it's fantastic. However, the bad way is YouTubers are so egotistical, especially the modern day with Jake Paul, especially Jake Paul and Logan Paul. And I like KSI a lot, but the way of his like laughing at Logan Paul when he lost, losing happens, it's part of the sport. Yes, Floyd Mayweather never lost, yes, Khabib never lost, but losing is part of the sport. One of the Charlo brothers lost to Tony Harrison, I believe. He lost by majority decision. He then went into another fight, KO. He then had a rematch against Tony Harrison, KO. He had an off night. He admitted that man was better on the night, but he come back and he battered Tony Harrison. He won that fight. He finished it, and it was a great fight. It was a good fight for him. So, you know, the problem is we get a lot of young people coming to the sport because of these YouTubers, and they think that losing is the end of a career. I've seen a lot of young people leading up to the Triple G fight that he just had saying, oh, he's washed up, he couldn't beat Canelo. People fail to realise Canelo lost his fight when he was younger against Floyd. Canelo is a freak of nature. I believe there is not a better fighter alive than Canelo right now. Canelo is in his prime. He is a monster. He makes everyone look like they're washed up, and they're not. And, you know, he lost. People saying Triple G is washed up, he's too old. He's 39. He went out there and he destroyed a one-sided beating of a title challenger. And I think that's where the toxicity comes from. If you see people losing one fight, and then you always notice there's a lot of younger people saying you're washed up, you're this, you're that. Losing is part of the sport, and I think the only problem with the YouTubers is we send a lot of young people here that think losing makes you washed up. Losing means, oh, you're shit. I've seen people actually saying that Jake Paul is a better boxer than Conor McGregor or Nate Diaz or Jorge Masvidal, because in MMA, Conor McGregor has 4 or 5 losses, Jorge Masvidal has like 13, and Diaz has like 11 or 12. But they failed to realise there are so many ways to lose in MMA. That doesn't mean they don't train their striking, but that also, you know, they've also had a lot more fights, and that's the problem. Is people think if Jake Paul's 2-0 and you know, Canelo is 54-1, there is still those people that will believe Jake Paul is a better fighter because he's undefeated, whereas it doesn't work like that. And that's the problem with the young people that follow you. Not young people in general. If you're young, don't think I'm categorizing you all. If you've come from the YouTube scene and you've only followed the YouTube scene, then that's the problem you'll see. There is probably young people out there that see this and they go, my God, people in my generation are so dumb that they think this one loss makes them washed up. It's not the case at all. And the way to look at it is some of the greats have lost. People that everyone idolizes, Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr., Muhammad Ali, they've all lost. They've all experienced loss in their life. Conor McGregor, people idolize him and he's lost. You know, so many great martial artists have lost in their career at some point. Even Israel Adesanya lost in a kickboxing match. That doesn't make him any less of a kickboxer, doesn't make him any less of a fighter. It happens, it's part of the sport. Being undefeated is not the only thing that matters. Anyways, that's my opinion on the good and the bad of YouTubers being in the boxing scene. And, you know, I think some YouTubers done it well. Joe Weller, KSI, they done it well. But when it started to get to the Pauls, the American side, I feel like it kind of become a bit of an ego battle more than anything. Next up, we're going to move on to Jake as a boxer himself. I'm going to be completely unbiased here. I'm going to just not be biased. I'm going to put my hatred for him to one side. And I'm going to say he has a pretty solid, basic set of skills. From all of his fights that I've seen, I've watched them all, just because I couldn't make this video if I hadn't watched them all. So it would be wrong of me to sit here and say he doesn't have a good set of skills, because he does. His straights, his jabs seem solid. You know, like I said, I couldn't make this video without watching his fights. I have watched them. The Anderson Gibb fight, he done well. He was accurate. When Anderson Gibb was fighting like a Poundland Mike Tyson, Jake Paul didn't panic. He didn't freeze. He just 1-2'd his way to victory. In theory, that's all he done. And, you know, the Nate Robinson, he threw some good hooks, threw some good overhands. Technically, he's sound. He isn't, you know, there's a lot of good amateurs in the UK, not even in the world, in the UK, that could destroy him. Hands down, they would bat him senseless. So against YouTubers and against Nate Robinson, he looked good. His technique is sound. He's learnt well. He's obviously trained hard. There's no taking that away from him. I'm not going to sit here and say he hasn't trained hard, because clearly he has. He's got good training behind him, and he's got a good coach behind him, and he's obviously working hard because his ego is on the line, which brings me to the next point. His ego is fucking phenomenal. I have never known a person to have such a huge ego in my entire life. He is 2-0 against non-boxers in exhibition matches with a pro record on the line, and he has a bigger ego than Floyd when he was 49-0. It is insane. These kids that watch him fight and they see their idol knock someone out, and they have a little wet spot in their trousers. It's actually insane how much they kiss this man's ass. So because that's all they've seen, they then get the hype behind him. They build him up and they make him believe he's as good as he thinks he is, which then brings me on to the ego of he thinks he can fight Conor McGregor. He calls out Masvidal and he calls out McGregor, and you know, now then he says in 3 years, look how well I've done. In another 3 years I could be ready for Canelo. That blew my fucking mind. How can you actually believe that in 3 years you could be ready for Canelo? I've had a fight in the ring. If you gave me 6 years to train, I would be a 10-0 pro if I was able to commit my entire, no corona, commit my entire life and body to boxing. I would be 10, 15-0. But I tell you what, I would not be ready for Canelo in 6 years, let alone in 3 years like he believes he is. He fought Anderson Gibb and Nate Robinson. Nate Robinson had put on a pair of gloves 3 months ago before this fight, and he's still done better than Anderson Gibb. So the Anderson Gibb fight doesn't even surprise me. Anderson Gibb is shocking. If you can remain calm under someone's pressure, you can batter Anderson Gibb. That's the only thing Anderson Gibb had on his side, was the pressure. And Jake Paul doesn't feel pressure in theory, which is impressive. I'm not going to take that away from him. He doesn't feel pressure, which well done to him. So anyways, we're going to move on to who I think Jake should fight next. There's a part of me that says put him in there with a wild animal. Put him in there with a grizzly bear or a silverback. Let it tear him apart, rip his head off. It's a part of me that says, alright, let him actually build up a reputation, so then when he loses it's that more dramatic. But the other issue with that is I don't want him to build up a reputation against bums and then go, I'm done now, I'm 6-0, I don't need to fight, just as that fight comes where someone knows they can beat him. I don't want him to fight McGregor, because that's a waste of McGregor's time. You know, he says things to Poirier like, you know, you've got less followers than my dog. It's irrelevant. That's the ego of him talking about having more followers. That does not matter. Followers have no weight on anyone's life when it comes. When you step in that ring, you can have 1 million followers or you can have 2 followers. When you step in that ring, you're 2 well-trained men with a pair of gloves on. Followers are irrelevant. So there's talk of Ben Askren fighting him. There's talks of a lot of people. Generally, I have no opinion on who he should fight. I don't want him to fight some bum. Ben Askren is the worst choice for him to fight because Ben Askren has no stand-up game. Yes, he was a champion in martial arts, and yes, he won a lot of titles in wrestling, and he is an athlete, but he sure as shit is not a boxer. And I genuinely believe Jake Paul would take it serious enough that he knows he can stay behind his jab, stay behind his straight, a few good hooks, and he will be able to beat Ben Askren. He'll tire Ben Askren out. Ben Askren is not fast. That's the only thing. Ben Askren might be an athlete. He might have more experience, but he's slow. And Jake Paul, unfortunately, is not slow. He's actually relatively quick, and he's got a solid set of moves on him. So in my opinion, I would like to see him get in the ring with a 2-0 pro. That's not going to happen because he needs to fight someone who's got clout. KSI is not a good idea. I think Jake Paul beats KSI. KSI's whole thing, yet again, is pressure, big overhands. Jake Paul will counter that, and in my opinion, win that fight. I could see Jake Paul winning most of the round, a few 10-8, maybe dropping KSI. I could be wrong with that. KSI could go out and have a whole different game plan, but it seems to me once KSI gets in the ring, his game plan flies out the window, whereas Jake Paul stays composed. And I hate to say it, but I try to remain unbiased when it comes to the actual boxing talk itself. I think KSI is a terrible idea. I think Logan is not a good idea because Jake's ego is bigger than Logan's, and Logan would take it easy on Jake in a sense and almost give him that win. Ben Askren is a bad idea. Ben Askren is not a boxer. That's not worth anyone's time to fucking pay for that. And while I'd want to say give him Masvidal, give him Canelo, that's not worth of their time either. I don't want to see him fight McGregor, that's a waste of time. I'd like to see him fight a solid amateur or pro with 11-12 wins, same weight class, you know, none of this like someone who's got to put on weight to meet Jake because Jake thinks he's Billy Big Balls. Put him up against a real fucking middleweight, a real light heavyweight, someone at his weight, someone at his height, and let them go fucking town him, let them destroy him. I have no opinion on who he should fight. He's calling out martial arts to fight in the ring. He's not calling out much boxers, which is obviously the case because he believes that a martial arts has never fully focused on boxing. They've always focused on kickboxing, Muay Thai, grappling, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, things like that. So I have no opinion on who he fights. I think I could see him probably fighting like, I don't know, McGregor at some point, Masvidal, Diaz would be a good one. And that's the insult, is that he thinks Diaz wouldn't be any good. I think Nick or Nate would batter Jake, personally. I think Jake would beat a lot of martial artists in the ring because that's his world at the moment. And he does have the crowd behind him. He does have the ego behind him. But I think once he fights a solid boxer with at least 4 or 5 years behind them, a few amateur bouts, a few professional bouts behind them, he won't stand a chance because this is not his world. This is his world when it comes to YouTube and calling out people that are absolutely irrelevant to him or don't want to notice him. So yeah, that's my opinion on that. You guys have to let me know your thoughts down below. And yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know who you think he'll fight. And if you don't agree with me with anything I said, let me know in the comments down below. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.